And I am excited. So the rundown of how this will go, we will have a brief overview of where RVAgreen 2050 is right now, what we're looking for in engagement, and then open it up to questions from everyone who's come through. Those questions, you will be able to just unmute yourself and voice your question. That way, well, since I can't use chat, so it's easier if we do it that way. So I guess any questions before we start from anyone, panelists, the people attending, just. Great. Okay, so I am going to share my screen with this presentation. Oops. I have lost this presentation. Let's see. Oh, man. Here we go. All right, so I guess I should also introduce myself. I'm Kendra. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Office of Sustainability. I have been working on the RVAgreen project since I started this job. And what we're going to do, quick overview. There's going to be, well, hold on a second. This is such an odd, I cannot share and let people in at the same time. That was very strange. Okay, so quick overview, climate change. It's a shift in the long-term average weather pattern, and it's caused by it's human-caused emissions, especially from burning fossil fuels, and that is what's driving climate change across the board. And so what we're looking at is anytime you use any energy within your building, turning on lights, turning off lights, heating, cooling, etc., driving any sort of vehicle, throwing things away, so waste creation is creating CO2 emissions and warming the atmosphere. What we're really going to see in Richmond is extreme heat, extreme precipitation, and rising sea level, which is going to cause climate shocks like flooding and more intense storms. So we're really concerned, we're thinking about that more from the human side of the impact. So safety, health, economic burden, food insecurity. Is the government able to provide core services and public safety? These are all things that we're really considering with our climate risk, and we're really trying to get in front of the problem before it happens and make sure that we are able to continue those core services and we don't have a significant increase in residential safety and so climate change is already happening in Richmond. We have some article titles from 2017 all the way up until February of this year. And what they're showing is that we've definitely had an increase in precipitation. There's been flooding, there's been drought, there's been extreme heat, there's been an increase in the allergy season in the city. So there's a lot of things that we're already experiencing right now. We don't have to just look into the future to see what Richmond will get, but we are experiencing climate change currently. And so what we really are looking at is how all of those things will really impact us on a more detailed level. So when you think of like safety and health, you're looking at things like injury and death, an increase in illness and chronic conditions, potential property damage, displacement, higher energy bills, higher food prices, the ability for emergency provisions to be provided, population displacement that goes beyond Richmond's borders, but having people move from like the Eastern Shore into Richmond due to the rising sea level. So these are things that we really want to consider in our planning process and in our communication with everyone as we move forward. And this is what we're really, or this is what the bigger picture of what RVAgreen 2050 is looking at. And then we get a little bit more specific when we look at what future weather we're looking to see. So we're going to have increase in our daily maximum temperature. Our average will be 75 degrees instead of 70. We'll move to 45 hot days, so any day over 95 degrees, and that's an increase from 11. Increase in the number of extended heat waves we have, and an increase in the number of days that have an inch or more in rainfall. So these are all things that we have to consider throughout this process, because the goal of RVAgreen 2050 is to hit 100% emission reduction by 2050 and a 45% reduction by 2030. And so as you can see here, looking at this graph, we are on our way, on track down to our net zero goal by 2050. And we want to make sure that we keep hitting our target goals as we move forward. And that has definitely been a consideration within the strategy, the objective and strategy development of RVAgreen 2050 to really help us strategically hit those 2030 and 2050 goals in the city of Richmond. So looking at where our community greenhouse gas emissions are coming from, you can see that 66%, so the majority of our greenhouse gas emissions are coming from building and energy usage. Then we have transportation, solid waste, and water and wastewater. But then when we look within the building and energy use, you can see that commercial and government energy are taking up the majority of this chart here. And so a lot of the things that you'll see in RVAgreen 2050 are strategies and objectives that are aimed more towards commercial and governmental greenhouse gas reduction and less so putting the burden specifically on residents. So that's something to really take into consideration throughout this process. So we're really using this plan, RVAgreen 2050, to really hit our climate action goal of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, acknowledging that climate change impacts are coming to the city or are in the city and will continue to come to the city. So we have the climate resilience part of it. And then we're really building this out through a framework of equity to make sure that we're considering the our different communities and the different burdens that everyone across the city is experiencing. And one of the ways that we're doing that is we've, over the summer of 2020, we participated in listening sessions with community-based organizations to really identify what our community priorities were. And those priorities will come in a slide a little later in this presentation. We have paid members on our roundtable who are residents of the city of Richmond who are paid to participate in this experience to give their lived experience, as well as really help us identify the best way to engage a variety of communities throughout the city to make sure that we're getting feedback from not just people who already know about RVAgreen 2050, but everyone who will be impacted by this planning process. For climate action and climate resilience, we've had technical modeling and risk assessment to make sure that we are really looking to see what we can do to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and where the risk lies for climate impacts in the city of Richmond. And in both of those, we have our working groups and best practices. So our working groups have our technical experts that are there to help us create our strategies to really meet our goals moving forward. And so in the equity part of this planning process, the reason we brought in equity is because we acknowledge that climate change is affecting some more than others. And so we're looking at root causes, social causes, and biological factors to really identify what is causing the increased sensitivity to climate change and vulnerability in different communities across the board. So what we do want to acknowledge is that RVAgreen 2050 is a racial equity centered plan because we acknowledge the racial segregation and racism history of the city of Richmond that has caused a variety of root causes and social factors that we have to take into consideration in our planning process. I really like to focus on our social factors here. So things like ability to afford basic necessities and resources, access to affordable housing, access to reliable transportation, access to affordable healthcare, and green spaces. It's really difficult to tell someone to just plant more green spaces in their yard or do something like that when they're already struggling to have access to affordable and quality housing. So really taking that into consideration when we're thinking about our strategies and what we're asking individuals to do to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So when we look at this across the board in the city of Richmond, those that live in low-income populations and communities of color are more likely to live in areas with less green space, have less access to energy-efficient housing, be more impacted by extreme weather events, lack access to public transportation, sidewalks, and bike paths, live in houses without air conditioning, and be exposed to higher air pollution. So in that process, over the summer, as I mentioned before, I had communication with the neighborhood or community-based organizations to really identify where concerns were across in different communities. And these concerns were not specifically focused on climate change, but just their general priorities and what they wanted to see in their communities. And a lot of what we got back was a change in how the government shares information and how transparent they are with their metrics and strategies, as well as the increasing the variety of ways communication and engagement happens around planning projects. And so making sure that we are having more strategic communication and targeting our communication to the community that we are really trying to reach, and not just having a broad communication plan that is supposed to be of interest to everyone, to really help identify what people wanted to see in their neighborhoods, which would focus mainly on access to jobs and jobs that have living wages, access to affordable housing, access to neighborhoods that have less litter, more green space, and more transportation options, as well as access to medical facilities. So that includes mental and physical health facilities, as well as access to clean air and clean water. So we really, in this planning process, are looking for ways to make sure our strategies and our objectives are considering what these priorities are and trying to touch on these priorities in the process of building out our greenhouse gas emission reductions to really decrease burden across the board and increase the quality of life for all residents in the city. So where we are right now is in this orange area right here. We are in our developing and refining strategies phase. We will have a really intense engagement period during April. So we're halfway through that. And then in May, I almost forgot which month came after April, so that was super weird. In May, we will take all of our feedback back from this engagement to really implement it into the strategies that we have out there, see what we need to change and shift around, and then we will move into the process of implementation framework and metrics. So that will be prepared for our next round of engagement, which will be the fall of this year. So what we are asking is for anyone who has any interest in the city of Richmond to participate in this process, to really help us shape what Richmond's resiliency future looks like, really help us direct funding for on-the-ground projects, and to bring a broader representation of all communities in the city into what they want to see out of our strategies, and if those strategies are meeting their priorities as we move through this process. And so I think, one of the things that we have created is our vision for this round. So all Richmonders, regardless of their identity or neighborhood, thrive in a climate resilient and climate neutral community. Our goals, as I mentioned before, 45% reduction by 2030, and then net zero emissions by 2050 to prepare for, adapt, and improve the community's resilience to local climate impacts. We have our 5 different pathways: buildings and energy, community, environment, transportation and mobility, waste reduction and recovery, and then our community priorities that I mentioned before. So we are today talking about our pathway of buildings and energy. We've already talked about our transportation and mobility pathway. That recording is also on our YouTube channel, which I can definitely send the link out to afterwards if you want to see that as well. And we, at the end of this question and answer part, there will be time, everyone's email with link to this particular video session should have come with links to the different strategy or survey options that we have. We have 3 different options. You have the option to read through the entire draft of objectives and strategies and comment on that. Similar to if you saw Richmond 300, it is in the same fashion where it's just a PDF document. You click where you have a comment and you just type that out and it just stays there, and we will take that information in. We also have our online survey forms. That is a 30-minute survey and a 10-minute survey option. All of them provide the information that we need from community and to understand what people want to see out of this planning process. It's really up to you to determine how much time you're willing to give us in this process. And I can say that today we have it in Spanish. So if you would like to take it in Spanish, that is also an option on our website. And so all the links will take you to that option. And so if you did not get the link, this is the link to where all of those different participation options are: RVAgreen2050.com/participate. And you can follow us on all of the socials at RVAgreen2050. Though I recently found out that the Parks and Rec Department has a TikTok. We do not have a TikTok, but you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, or send any emails throughout this process with questions or comments to rvagreen@richmondgov.com. And so with that, are there any questions before we get into our panel discussion? I mean, I have my own question. Am I still sharing my screen? Y'all don't see my screen anymore. You do see my screen.
I don't see it. It's just a big.
We're seeing a black screen.
Yeah,
a black
screen. It says end of slideshow.
Click to exit. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I don't see that. So. Oh, here we go.
There you go.
Okay. All right. if there are no questions outside of myself throughout this process, now we will have our two panelists introduce themselves. We have Michael Donnenberg and Irina Carlos, who are here, who are part of the Buildings and Energy working group to really talk through a lot of this process, introduce themselves and what they've been working on. And we can start with Michael Donnenberg.
Thank you, Kendra. Hi, everybody. My name's already been said. It's Michael. I'm been part of this buildings and energy group, and it's been a real pleasure to be part of the process. I don't know a lot about buildings or energy. I'm not an expert in building things or heating them or electrifying them. By my trade is I'm a doctor. I'm a physician. My specialty is infectious diseases. And as a doctor and just as a person who keeps up with the news, I am very concerned with the damage to our climate that we have done as human beings and the consequences, especially the health consequences of climate damage. And as you saw from Kendra's presentation, here in Richmond, one of the biggest contributions is our energy use and the buildings and how we heat them. And so if we're going to solve this tremendous problem, we need to concentrate on those as well as other factors, but those are really important factors. So I just wanted to be part of the process, and it's been a real pleasure working with these professionals from the Department of Public Utilities who have taken a lot of care to involve the community and make sure that equity is central to everything that's being done in this plan, and to envision a future where we're burning no more fossil fuels, where people are healthier, and where Richmond thrives.
Thank you. And now we'll have Irina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Irina Carlos. I live in Jackson Ward. I grew up in Richmond as well. I grew up in Forest Hill, and I've moved all over the place, but I returned back to Richmond because it's a really important place to me and to a lot of other people. And I think, in a smaller city like Richmond, individuals can make a bigger difference. And it's incumbent upon everybody who can be involved to do what they can. Like Michael, I'm not a buildings and energy expert. However, I do have experience living and working in them. And I have experience, using energy. So I work for the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. I do communications mainly for our climate programs. And facilitation is a really big part of that. So I was really excited about this group because they weren't, okay, my phone thinks I'm talking to it. That's weird. Sorry. I was interested in working with this group because they weren't asking me for my expertise on buildings and energy, although we did have a lot of fantastic experts in these fields. I was able to ask questions about permitting battery storage, which I would have no idea about. But for me, it really provided an opportunity to kind of help gather and shape others' feedback, to help find the appropriate language that reflects what the consensus in our group is, and so it's for me been a really valuable way to be involved and to help address some of the inequities that I've seen, growing up in Forest Hill and then coming to Jackson Ward. I know this is a buildings and energy discussion, and Kendra, you've heard me say this 5 million times, but this neighborhood has no trees. And there are a lot of people who just didn't grow up with having a tree that they could go read a book under. And so sometimes, when other people come in and they're able to share, like, well, here's my perspective, here's what I've seen, like we could totally have some more trees. You know, I think then you start sharing ideas and finding the people who can help you get to that point. So this has been a really great experience, and I think RVAgreen 2050, it's a fantastic plan. And you know, please help share it with everybody that you know. There are so many different ways that you can comment and get involved, and I'm really excited to follow it in the future.
Great. I would also like to share that two of my colleagues, Wendy and Dawn, are here, who have been leading this working group from the office. So we also have them in attendance. So I would like to open the floor to questions from anyone. And you can also feel free to use the raise your hand feature.
Hi, my name's Rebecca Aaron Sidner. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I was wondering if you have looked at what other cities around the country are doing as far as like green building codes and things like that, and what you think, what some of the things are that you've gleaned from that.
And this question is directed to, I'm happy to, I see that our colleagues from City of Richmond are all still on mute, so I guess I'll step in. Yeah, well, the background information that was shared in the working group included plans from many cities. Portland and comes to mind, but cities large and small as well. And we were able to use those as resources and sort of borrow what we thought would apply to Richmond and not what we thought, you know, was you know, not applicable. We were able to, you know, sort of characterize some as not necessarily applicable or achievable or too slow or too fast, and see what fit best. So I'm grateful that we had that background material at our disposal to look at. And thanks for the question.
And I'll just add to that, Michael, I really appreciate your response because, you know, we had so much technical information and, you know, lots of peer climate action plans and lots of best practices from our technical modeling consultants. But making this information really tangible to every Richmonder is the goal. Like that's the key to success. So Michael and Irina were both very humble in saying that they're not experts. They're very wise at taking lots of very complicated information and really turning it into something that we can use. So I hope that answers the question, but if there's additional questions on that, I'm happy to answer.
And it might have been more code specific too, but I think with that, we have to kind of follow whatever the state electrical codes, energy efficiency legislation, that type of thing, which I know wasn't quite as successful this last General Assembly session as was hoped for as far as building energy efficiency code. But we are keeping an eye on that too.
Yeah, and I just wanted to provide not a direct example, but you know, your office did a really great job of looking at these strategies from other states, but it's not plug and play. There are, I mean, I think that's part of why RVAgreen 2050 convened a diverse group of stakeholders, because, you know, Jackson Ward is unlike any other place in the world. Richmond is unlike any other place in the world. And you really need that lived experience from people who have lived, you know, the spectrum of experiences in Richmond to really help hone in on that.
But I will add that there are some specific strategies around green building and some of these topics we're talking about. So I encourage anyone listening to go on to the Conveo document that Kendra was describing and read through those strategies under the buildings and energy pathway and make any comments that you think would be helpful and useful.
Thank you.
The floor is open for the next question.
Hi, can you hear me? My name's Sarah Wiziger.
Yes.
And my question, I hope I can focus it enough, but has to do with the change for residential from gas to electric. I'm afraid what's going to happen is that homeowners with the means are going to be able to opt out of the natural gas system for heating and hot water, and people who are renters or low-income homeowners won't have that opportunity. And so much seems to be focused on homeowners. I just wonder, you know, is there a way to advance electrification in multifamily that helps people might be left out of the most programs that are, you know, targeted towards homeowners?
Sarah, thanks for that question. I think I heard Sarah, but I might be wrong. Is that what you said?
Yes,
Great. So that is a major concern, and it's especially because we're using equity, the lens of equity for everything we're doing. And so, you know, the third objective is about residential, and it mentions without too many specifics the incentives that'll be required. I think part of what is intended here is that you know, grants and other forms of breaks to help landlords make that change, to make them want to make the change, not just to electricity from gas, but also the other things that have to be done with improving their buildings so that they're more resilient and don't waste as much energy. This is, you know, gonna be a big thing to tackle, and but it's completely recognized that it has to be part of the solution, because you know, we can't make the progress we need to make only, you know, concentrating on a small part of the population. And we especially need to make progress in the most vulnerable communities, because they suffer the most effects of the climate, you know, of climate damage. You know, the lack of trees that Irina already mentioned makes their homes hotter, and the burning of fossil fuels combines with other health inequities to make their, you know, asthma and lung disease and heart attacks, you know, more common. So I think everyone recognizes that this is a difficult but necessary part of the problem to solve.
I also wanted to add that, you know, although right now it might seem that this document is kind of visionary, we have to do it. We have to figure out how to do it. It's going to happen. Grant funds are coming. DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, administers the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI. That's the carbon cap and trade program that is going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from power plants in, I believe, 13 states. Virginia just had, I believe it was the beginning of March, just had its first auction of the year. They're supposed to be quarterly auctions, so there should be 3 more this year. The state, I just pulled it up, netted $43.6 million in the first auction, which is, so if they got that much in all 4 of the auctions this year, the state could receive more than $174 million. And the state had only estimated that they would receive between 106 and 109 million. And half of that is actually going to the Department of Housing and Community Development for low-income energy efficiency programs. So it is recognized that that is a big deal. The people who can pay to switch from gas to electric should, for new, I think it's a lower hanging fruit for new development. Say, you're not going to install new gas lines on new development, but there is recognition that the folks who are already cost burdened by rent and utilities are not going to be able to stash money away to swap out their infrastructure on their rentals. And there are already weatherization assistance programs that low-income renters can qualify for, but that's just for weatherization. So that can help reduce your utility costs, or at least make your living space more comfortable. But that still is kind of just nibbling around the edge of the issue of we've got to switch to more sustainable energy sources.
Yeah, I guess it seems like it would be really great if the city had something in place to capture some of those funds for existing buildings and create the incentives. And it would be nice if there was something in this plan that could reflect the need for that and measure it as well. And that I'm just really concerned that it's going to be one of those things that if everybody, a lot of residences, and I know the gas system does depend a lot on residential customers, and if people are all jumping out, the last people in are going to be paying more, and maybe the city of Richmond taxpayers will pay more. And it seems like we need a long-term plan for making that switch, both residential, commercial, industrial. And that's all I'll say for now, my little lecture.
That's a great suggestion. And I would ask, could you please comment on the plan itself, just to make sure that it's accurately captured?
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Also, I don't know how you pronounce it, but the Convio public commenting platform is absolutely fantastic. I don't know if you have commented on public documents before, but it is a wonderful experience. You get to just basically drop your comments in on like sticky notes.
Any other questions? If there are no more questions, I would like to give this opportunity to our panelists to share which strategy or objective you have been most excited about in this process. And so, I mean, I say preferably from buildings and energy, but also if it's from some other pathway, that is also an acceptable answer.
Are you able to pull those up?
The strategies?
Yeah.
All, maybe. I don't know if we'd be able to see
We
all
had
of
a
them.
short list, did we?
Let me.
You know, while you're trying to do that, I'll just say that I referenced objective 3, which is ensure all Richmonders have equitable access to affordable and renewable clean energy. I should have referenced objective 2, which is more about the buildings, the residential buildings, but they overlap. Objective 3 is more like getting everybody's electric to be free of fossil fuels. And I don't know, I think that is one of the most exciting things, because the price of renewable energy and renewable electricity development has come down and continues to come down, so that solar and wind are becoming the economically most feasible way to make electricity. And that is a big, factor that's going to make this happen. So, personally, I've been able to put solar on my own property. It doesn't supply 100%, so what I can't supply, I'm able to purchase through community solar, so that all my electricity is solar. You can also purchase wind, and we need to make it easy for everyone to do that. We need to make not just easy, we need to make it the rule, so that there is no more electricity generated from burning fossil fuels. And objective 3 is going to help us get there quicker. So that's if I have to pick one, I like the ensure all Richmonders have equitable access to affordable and renewable clean energy.
So that's actually the one I was going to pick too. I pulled it up. My breakout group facilitated, or I helped facilitate the breakout group that sort of dove into that objective. And I just I thought this was illustrative of the process. So what we started with at the beginning of that meeting, and just listen, there are some very subtle differences. So what we started with was ensure all buildings have access to affordable clean energy. And so we talked about that, and we thought, well, why are we ensuring this for buildings? We want to ensure that people have access to buildings that have affordable clean energy. But then we thought that equity was even more important to center. Does clean energy really need to be cheap for everybody? I mean, it would be great, but we want to make sure that it is affordable for everybody. So we want to make sure that it's equitable. So we suggested ensure all buildings and users have equitable access, production, and use of clean energy, which is better, but kind of clunky. And then what we ended up with, I thought, perfectly captured all of that. And that was ensure all Richmonders have equitable access to affordable and renewable clean energy. So, I know we might just be tweaking one word here or there, but it can make a lot of difference. I think especially, changing all buildings to all Richmonders, I think makes it clear that this is really a people-focused process.
That's a great point, and then I'll build on that even more. to kind of explain this process. So you can see by what she's showing right now, if we're talking about, say, this first one, solar installations, that has a very high impact on reducing our carbon emissions. So that's why all 3 bars are filled in purple. And then it shows the next column, the potential climate resilience impact. It's more impactful on carbon emissions than resilience. But what we tried to do on every single strategy was add that additional language that Irina's talking about so that there were more potential community priority impacts. So by adding additional language about focusing on frontline communities, reducing disproportionate high energy burden in those neighborhoods, providing the financial assistance and education, adding all of those components to it are what allow it to then have those co-benefits where it's meeting the priorities that are really important to people in those neighborhoods.
And I'll throw in mine. I'll say education and awareness, just to be different, because I think that's a lot of it. I mean, if people are aware of where their energy use is going, how much things cost and that type of thing, I think they can be motivated to change their behaviors. So I was just looking it up because I know it was a big statistic, like the US, we're 4% of the world population, but we use 17% of the energy in the world. I mean, that's just astronomical. And, a lot of that is due because we do have relatively inexpensive energy, even though we might not think so, but we do compared to a lot of countries. So I think just kind of educating people, making them aware of things they can do to conserve energy, to make their homes more resilient or buildings more resilient and energy efficient would go a long ways towards helping reduce our usage.
Yeah, so if anyone is curious, this is a Conveo document that is on the screen. So this is what it would look like when you're there. So no surprises if you decide to go through the whole document. If there are no more questions or comments on this process.
Kendra, I would just ask you if you could scroll up to the top of the document and just kind of, in general, walk people through what all of these symbols and everything mean. It's at the top, it explains a lot of background. Or is it, yeah, up there?
Yeah, so you can see that there's the bars for greenhouse gas emission reduction impact. We have the potential climate resilience impact images here, and the potential community priorities impact. And so on the side here, depending on how filled in each image is, there is an explanation for how direct or indirect the impact is going to be for both climate resilience and our community priorities impact. What that looks like in real time, you can see here that we have, especially this one is really good for greenhouse gas emissions, no climate resilience impact or low climate resilience impact that we calculated, and it's meeting an indirect impact for our community priorities that are colored here. So that is kind of like a quick overview of what this would look like. It's broken down into our different pathways, and that is one of the 3 options offered for participation in this process. And then also, this has been a comment before, if you write your name while you're commenting, your name shows up with your comment, but you can write or choose to be anonymous throughout this process. So just something to consider. But if there are no more questions or comments, I would like to thank everyone for attending, and to ask that everyone use this extra time to either take one of the 3 ways of participation, the 10-minute survey, the 30-minute survey, or the Conveo document. And if you have already taken the survey, I ask that you use this time to share the survey with someone in your network. So that would be great. I would really like to thank our panelists for coming. Thank you so much for participating in this process, and then also being here to answer questions and sharing your experience. That has been excellent. And I would like to thank everyone for attending. Thank you so much. That is the end.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kendra. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it.